IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Wednesday. That means it is time for the midweek rundown for Notre Dame. It's not a bye week anymore, so we're kind of back on track talking about the next Notre Dame football game, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Obviously, Notre Dame takes on Pitt this Saturday afternoon, 3:30 game. Irish Breakdown will be there, obviously covering the game. But before the game, we're going to have an Irish Breakdown tailgate. We will have more details on that as we get closer. Probably start around 11-ish is probably when we'll get started on Saturday. So if you're in town, be ready for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to having some fun and meeting some of y'all, seeing some of y'all again. So that'll be a blast. But Notre Dame kicks off its big final stretch against Pitt on Saturday. And it's been a very interesting, if you break the season into thirds, look at the first third of the season, Notre Dame was dominating teams. I think the margin of victory is like 46 to 10, something along those lines, the first four games. The last four games have been a much more of a struggle. You had a tight loss to Ohio State, a loss to Louisville. You had a very tight last-second win over Duke, and then, of course, you had the blowout win over USC. Now you enter kind of the third stretch of the season, the third quarter of the season. It's not really a quarter because the final third of the season. And Notre Dame enters a situation, we've talked about it a lot the last couple weeks. This is a big time for Notre Dame. And so what we'll do today is just kind of talk a little bit about kind of what we're going to learn about Notre Dame, one way or the other, what we need to see from Notre. Now, we need to see we've done a lot of, but kind of what we're going to learn, why this period is so important. We've talked a lot about what we need to learn. We'll talk about why this period is so important. What we will learn about Notre Dame, one way or the other. Then we'll dive into the matchups that matter. We'll dive into how Notre Dame stacks up against Pitt on paper. Talk about who these two teams are, and then we'll spend time on one specific matchup on each side of the ball that I think is going to have the biggest impact on this game. So we'll dive into that, both sides of the ball, and then we'll wrap things up with a bit of a step up period. And we'll talk about some players and a coach that really need to step up in this final stretch of the season. And we'll kind of see where time is at that point in time. If we have some time at the end, I'll dive into a little bit of a, I may dive into a little bit of a kind of previewing the games from this weekend. But I'm as of right now, my prediction would be that we won't get into that. But we're going to at least talk about the first three things for sure. And so let's begin. And we've talked a lot about the importance of this stretch for Notre Dame. And I want to make sure that we're not having a hyperbolic conversation about this and that we're really diving into, why this stretch matters for Notre Dame and why it's an important period for Notre Dame. So I'm trying to get my gears situated. All right, trying to do it all backwards. But, why is this an important period for Notre Dame? And, it's just year two of Marcus Freeman's era. And as I've said, I wrote after the Louisville loss, Marcus Freeman is going to be defined by what happens after that loss to Louisville. We've only seen one game since then, certainly in a great start, right? But we're going to learn a lot about this football team over these next 4 weeks because you had that game against Louisville, that against USC. You bounce back, you dominate USC. You go into the bye week. You come into these last 4 games, and then you've got the postseason, and you say, okay, now it's time to learn a lot about this football team. We asked the question, will Marcus Freeman be someone who knows how to get his teams to finish strong? Because that's certainly something that we know that Pat Narduzzi hasn't been able to do. As I've mentioned, the last 3 years in November, Pitt only has one loss, and that was to a college football playoff team in Clemson and back in 2020. So they're a team that finishes strong. Can Marcus Freeman have that as well? That's one thing we're going to learn, but there's a lot more at stake than just learning more about Marcus Freeman's football team and the kind of program that he's going to build at Notre Dame. And that's kind of what we're going to dive into today. Is at the beginning is why is this final stretch so important, Notre Dame, beyond just, hey, got to go 10-2, right? There's a lot more at stake than that. To begin, obviously, we're going to learn a lot about Notre Dame and what this team is made of. They're playing inferior opponents in November. They're not playing for a playoff berth. What kind of leadership does this team have from a coaching level and a player level to say, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to dominate. We're going to play our best football because we are playing for something. At the very least, we're playing for Notre Dame. And so we're going to learn a lot about that. But there's even more important things to it. Number one is postseason. Notre Dame is playing for the postseason. Now, is that going to be a college football playoff berth? Highly unlikely. Here's the interesting thing, and I said this on the message board the other day. Notre Dame, the odds of Notre Dame playing for a playoff berth are like slim to none. Like that's not even remotely a concern right now heading into Pitt. Maybe heading into Stanford, if like utter chaos happens, maybe we're having a conversation about it, but the odds are unlikely. However, the thing that's going to be intriguing is when the first playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. I'll be willing to bet you a dollar that Notre Dame is going to be ranked higher than Ohio State was when the playoff rankings first came out in 2014. And if I remember correctly, Ohio State was ranked 16th at that time. Now, of course, that is a bit of an anomaly. That is not normally how things go. Most of the teams that get ranked are ranked are much higher than that when they get to the college football playoff rankings. So, the odds of Notre Dame getting there right now, especially with because there's still so many undefeated teams in these leagues. And so it's just going to be very hard. There's two undefeated teams in the Big Ten. There's an undefeated team in the Big 12. There's an undefeated team in the ACC. There's still an undefeated team in the Pac-12. There's a ton of one-loss teams. There's just a situation where it's just there's so much that would have to happen that it's just at this point, it's just not really super worth discussing. But that doesn't mean that there's not a big postseason opportunity in front of Notre Dame. And right now, Notre Dame needs to not only play for a really good postseason opportunity, which I want to be a New Year's Six game, but also building momentum going into that game. So when you look at Notre Dame, and we don't know who the opponent's going to be, right? And so it could be anyone from Air Force as the best group of five team to, it could be, actually should be James Madison should be in that conversation, but they're not. Air Force, I'm trying to think of who even is among the group of five that's even ranked at this point in time, or we even have a chance. But right now, it's just kind of Air Force is really it. But when you look at the group of five, and it could be that kind of team in a New Year's Six, perhaps. And at this point in time, I don't even care. At this point, I just want to get that New Year's Six game and get that win. But there's also an opportunity, and at least Tulane. That's the other one I was trying to think of. There's at least a decent opportunity that if Notre Dame gets into one of those New Year's Six games, it's going to be against a big name opponent in Alabama and Oklahoma, Texas, a team like that. And it's just another opportunity for Notre Dame to go out and say, hey, we're going to go out and perform well and get that big name victory, that big bowl victory, because Marcus Freeman is still building his reputation. He's still building his brand. What kind of coach is he? I know the kids love playing for him. He's got a lot of swagger on the recruiting trail. Obviously, the success on the recruiting trail has been very strong for Notre Dame. But at the same time, you still have to ask yourself, at some point, he's going to start getting judged more and more and more on what his record is and the teams that he's defeated. And so obviously being 4-0 down the stretch greatly increases his record. Right now, Marcus Freeman is, let's see, as a head coach, and I don't count the Fiesta Bowl. I know some people do. I don't. But his record is, since really becoming the full-time head coach, would be 15-6 right now. That's decent. It's better than what Lou Holtz was. Okay, yeah, but Lou Holtz walked into a different situation than Marcus Freeman walked into. And even then, I don't think Lou Holtz was what, at one point 13-6 before they lost their last three games of the 1987 season. But it's just different situation. He walked into a different situation Lou Holtz walked into. So 15-6 is solid. Run the table, and all of a sudden you're talking about 19-6, and then you go into a major bowl game. You're talking about, and win that, you're talking about 20-6, and we'll have won 6 straight games to end the season, and you will have had chances to beat some big name opponents, and that's really a big opportunity here when it talks about building momentum. the next 4 games are going to build momentum. And here's what I mean by that. Ryan and I discussed this a little bit yesterday. But it's one thing to win the next 4 games simply because you're just better than everybody that you play, right? That's one thing. It's one thing to say, "Hey, look, we beat Pitt, we beat Clemson, beat Wake, beat Stanford. They're not very good. We won the game. Winning's all that matters." Kind of, but not really. Again, process over results. If Notre Dame simply just out talents the last 4 teams that they play, that doesn't necessarily put them in position to kind of have the momentum to be successful. What does it mean by momentum? I'm not talking about like the emotional momentum. I'm talking about the execution momentum to where you're able to address the things that have caused your program to have some issues. It's a momentum in regard to, hey, we got to get our personnel right and get that group rolling. So, hey, look, who is our receivers going to be? What's our running back? How are we going to use our running back room? How are we going to use this package on defense? How are we going to really utilize our D line? Is this who we are really going to be, or is this a USC Duke specific thing? All those type of things are building your team to start playing at its best going into that postseason. And so if you are able to get into a big New Year's Six bowl against an Alabama, an LSU, an Oklahoma, a Michigan, an Ohio State, whoever that may be, and I don't have a clue who that's going to be at this point in time, but if it is a big name opponent, or even if it's just a Power Five but not a big name, let's say you get Florida would be a big name, but let's say you get, I don't know, Ole Miss, that's not considered a traditional big time program. That's a possibility. Right now, Ole Miss is 6-1. They've got a shot to be the second or third highest ranked team in the SEC when it's all said and done, right? I mean, they've got a better record than Bama, even though Bama beat them head to head. But they've got a win over LSU. So if LSU beats Bama and Ole Miss wins out, Ole Miss will have beat LSU and they'll win the SEC West and play in the SEC title game. There's a chance Notre Dame could play them in a New Year's Six game. Is that the kind of needle moving win from a program you beat Alabama standpoint? No. But if you go into the SEC to a big bowl game, a New Year's Six game, and you beat an SEC team, it's a needle moving win just from a big picture standpoint. And that's really what Notre Dame needs to be preparing for, needs to be building for. And so just scraping by your next 4 teams just because you're better than them doesn't build that. So Notre Dame is needing to build some momentum. Another aspect of what we're going to learn about Notre Dame is we need to find answers. Marcus Freeman needs to find answers. So we as fans are going to learn things about Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff, but Marcus Freeman also needs to learn things about the coaching staff. So if you look at Jared Parker and the offensive coaching staff, and right now we're all, dealing with the conversations about how he wasn't the guy and he's not, and he may not be. We don't know. That's the whole point, because when you look at the offense and you break it down into thirds, the first 4 games of the season, Notre Dame averaged 46 points per game, 508.8 yards per game, and 8.3 yards per play, which is outstanding. The last 4 games, they've only averaged as a team 25.8 points per game. It's a little less than that as an offense because you've got a defensive touchdown. You've got a special teams touchdown. Only 320.3 yards per game and 5.3 yards per play. The lowest total of the first 4 games is 444 yards and 7.5 yards per play. The highest numbers of the last 4 games is 381 yards and 6.1 yards per play. Dramatic difference. And so right now, and here's the point that I'm making is if we reversed those results. So let's say the first 4 games of the year, Jared Parker's first 4 games, the offense only averaged like 25.8 points per game, 320.3 points per game, 5.3 yards per play. And we'd all in September been like, this is a terrible move by Marcus Freeman, bad hire. This is why you don't hire your friend, which is what, I hear constantly and those type of things. And then all of a sudden, the last 4 games, the most recent 4-game stretch, they were averaging 46 points per game, 508 yards per game, and then 8.3 yards per play. We'd be saying, hey, guy's found his rhythm. He's found his groove. He's kind of getting into the flow, and he's turned it around, and maybe he might be the guy. But that's not reality. Having said that, can Jared Parker push the right buttons to get this offense back on track? That's a very important thing because, like in 2021, I was a little less praiseworthy of the offense because they put up numbers and yards, but it was against bad teams with bad defenses. Notre Dame doesn't play any good teams down the stretch. Clemson's right now just sadly not a good team. And I say sadly simply because it's just going to be tougher for Notre Dame to get that statement win over a ranked team to maybe make that surprising run as a two-loss opponent into the postseason. That's what I mean by that. But at the same time, the reality is those teams aren't very good because of their offenses. Now, Stanford's just bad everywhere. But if you look at Wake, even Wake, for example, but if you look at Wake, Clemson, and Pitt, they're all pretty decent defenses. Pitt ranks 26th in college football in total defense. Clemson ranks 7th in total defense. Wake Forest ranks 62nd, but their scoring defense is better than that. Their scoring defense this year is 46th. They're actually only giving up 22 points per game, which is by far the best performance from a Wake Forest defense in recent years. They were 28.3 last year, 28.9 the year before that, 32.8, 29.1. 33.3, 28.3. So 2016 is the last time the Wake Forest gave up less than 28 points a game. They gave up 22.2. So their defense has been pretty good this year. The reason that matters is because they're going to play some good defenses down the stretch. So when you look at Pitt, it's a quality defense. When you look at Clemson, that's a quality defense. When you look at Wake, that's a quality defense. And Clemson's even above quality defense. So the offense is going to get tested much more than the defense is. And Ryan and I broke this down yesterday when we talked about the offenses that Notre Dame is going to face. They're not going to face very good offenses. They should really dominate these next 4 teams because none of them are very good on offense. But that's not true of the Notre Dame offense. They're actually going to face some quality defenses. So if Jared Parker is unable to push the right buttons, and if the staff is unable to push the right buttons, then they're going to continue to struggle on offense. They're going to probably win at least 3 of the next 4, probably win the next 4, unless Clemson wakes up all of a sudden. But you're not going to really feel great about that. But you're going to have an answer, and the answer is going to be after a good start. Jared Parker the next 8 games just couldn't get it done. With a veteran offensive coordinator, with a veteran quarterback, with a really good running back, with a good tight end room, with a good offense, veteran offensive line for the most part, just couldn't get it done. And you're going to have your answer about whether or not Jared Parker's the guy. But Marcus Freeman also is going to get a chance, and we are going to get a chance to see if Jared Parker can be that guy. So if you look at the last 4 games, Notre Dame in 3 of those games played really good defenses and didn't play well. And so, look, yeah, you got to do better against better teams. That's not an excuse. It's not just a justification. It's just a reality. They played some very good defenses and at times struggled. Did what they needed to do to win in one of those games, but not the other. So if you look at the last 4 games, Notre Dame has played the number 3 scoring defense in the country, the number 5 scoring defense in the country, and then Louisville is the number 39 scoring defense in the country. And you struggled in those games, right? And you scored below those teams' scoring averages in 2 of those 3 games. So you scored above those teams' scoring averages in 2 of those 3 games, but it was barely. Ohio State's only given up 10 points a game. Notre Dame only scored 14. Duke's given up 13.9 points per game. Notre Dame only scored 21. Louisville's getting up 20.6. Notre Dame only scored 20. That's the one that they were below. So you look at it and say, yeah, they didn't play very good defenses, or they played really good defenses and they didn't play very well. That's not okay. But you're still going to play quality defenses down the stretch. So if you can turn it around and start scoring a lot more points and being more efficient, being more explosive, get the offense back, then it may say, hey, we may have something here. Let's see what he can do now with another full off season and all those type of things. So we're going to learn that one way or the other. We're going to learn that answer to about Jared Parker. That's going to also tell us a little bit about Joe Rudolph. It's going to tell us a little bit about Chancey Stuckey. Can he get this receiving core back on track? They're healthy now, so no more injury excuses. It's time to get this group back on track. It's going to tell us about a lot of these coaches, to be honest with you. It's going to tell us a little bit about Marta Biaggi down the stretch, although, that's a little bit of a different conversation. But, these coaches that are in their first year, some of them have been up and down. We're going to learn a lot about them down the stretch. We're also going to find out we're going to have some questions answered, or some questions arise, or have some answered about personnel down the stretch, So you're going to get into some things of, okay, you've just said, hey, we're riding with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler or guard. That's the decision the coach has made. I don't agree with it, but that's not really the conversation. We're going to find out if they are correct or not in making those moves, but more importantly, how those guys play is going to tell us a lot about who this team is going into the offseason. So, if Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler struggle down the stretch, then you say, hey, open competition at guard, no doubt about it. If those guys play really well down the stretch, then you say, hey, look, good decision by Joe Rudolph to stick with those guys. The offensive line is finally getting going, and now there may be a position battle in the spring, but there's strong incumbents now that are going to be hard to beat out. That's an example. Wide receiver. Okay. You've had some freshmen now stepping into the starting lineup, playing a lot more snaps. Do they then take advantage down the stretch? Say, hey, you know, we've passed those guys up. We're better than they are, and we're that guy. Or do some of the veterans step up and say, okay, I've been injured or I haven't been playing well, but now's my chance to go out there and shine, and I'm going to be part of this. There's guys that are going to have to step up down the stretch at wide receiver, for example, to say, hey, Notre Dame in January, so we're now, November, December, in 3 months, in less than 3 months, Cam Williams is going to be showing up. Micah Gilbert's going to be showing up, right? Those guys are going to say, hey, I'm going to have something to say about who's playing a receiver next year. So some of these receivers in the roster have a chance to say, hey, I need to position this shouldn't be in their heads, but this is kind of what we're going to learn and what the coaches are going to learn. I don't want the players worrying about this, but this is going to be in the back of the mind of the coaches and us as fans is, okay, well, I had high hopes for Tobias Merriweather. Does he step up at any point in time or not? If he doesn't, let me say, hey, maybe he's just not that guy. If he does, you say, okay, now you go into the offseason feeling really good, like the light finally went on for him. How does Chris Tyree finish the season? That's going to determine a lot about kind of what he's going to do or what you're going to do. So there's a lot of these things at different positions where, and not even just in games, but in the last 4 weeks of preparation, last 5 weeks of preparation, because you have the bye week in the middle of that. What young guy, because every year we hear about this, like the light went on for some young kid down the stretch, and boy, we're expecting big things. One position I'm looking at and one I'm going to be asking about with my sources throughout the next month is, how's Kenny Minchey doing? And, I'm going to have that intel piece up later tonight, but I'm hearing some good things, but how has he finished the last 4 games? How does he play down the stretch? I'm hearing his confidence is raised. He's playing better. How does he do down the stretch? That's going to determine or have play a role in, okay, do you need to go to the portal for another dude or not, or another starter or not? So there's a lot of these things that kind of go into these last 4 games, last 5 weeks, 4 games that are going to have an impact about how you feel your team is performing and how certain players are performing that are going to then dictate decisions that you as a staff make in December, in January, when you start looking at the portal. And so that's a big part of what is going to be at stake in this last 4 games as well. Last 2 things before we dive into the Pitt matchup is, number one is NFL decisions are going to be impacted greatly by what we see the next 4 weeks, as will 5th and 6th year options are going to be impacted a lot by what we see the next 5-6 weeks, or 4 to 5 weeks, or games, 4 games, 5 weeks. Here's what I mean by that. There are certain players that maybe right now are thinking about going pro, that whatever happens the next 4 months may impact that positively. Hey, you know what? It's time to go. It may impact it from standpoint of like, you know what? I'm just not ready yet. I'm not getting the feedback yet. My film down the stretch was not as good, or was really good, and I'm just still not getting the love from the next level. So I'm going to come back for another year. How guys finish seasons always has an impact on their decisions to go. Sometimes it's not the right decision because they're kind of maybe overplaying how they, or over, trying to think of the way to put this, but they're kind of asking themselves or saying to themselves, hey, I played great. And eventually they're going to figure it out, when in reality, no, you're not going to really rise. And some do, though. So NFL decisions are going to be made. How certain guys perform down the stretch is going to have an impact on what decisions the coaches make in regard to 5th and 6th year seniors, which then has an impact on the portal, because you have to decide, hey, we have 3 spots, for example. I'm just making a point. Do we use those 3 spots to bring back 2 5th year seniors or 6th year seniors, and then we're going to get a portal guy? Do we say, hey, it's time to move on? We've got some younger guys at your position, and we need to use that spot for a portal position. And how guys perform down the stretch is going to have a big say in that. How guys perform, not just the starters, but guys behind them. So just for example, how Jalen Sneed and Drake Bowen and Jaden Alsbury, Nolan Ziegler perform over the next month on whether it's on scout team, whether it's as backup linebackers getting number 2 reps, whether it's on special teams, could have an impact on who the Notre Dame coaching staff decides to bring back. It's not just how does Maris play, how does JT play, how does Jack play, and that's true in a lot of positions. And so there's a lot at stake in that regard. And then finally, recruiting momentum. How well Notre Dame plays will continue to have an impact on recruiting. How big of one, that's debatable, but it will have an impact. And so when you look at that, that's another big finale where if Notre Dame goes down the stretch and just whips their next 4 opponents, and they honestly they should. They have to earn it, but they should. Is you gotta go down the next 4 weeks and just really handle your business and say, "Boy, you guys are really playing at a high level. Notre Dame's offense is rolling, the defense is rolling." There's a lot of different things as to why they just look good. That's gonna impact recruiting positively. And so that's a final piece of what we are going to learn about this football team and what's at stake for this football team over the final 4 games, final 5 weeks with the bye in the middle. And it's going to have a big impact on what Notre Dame does in the postseason as a team, what decisions are made in the postseason, and then just the momentum and the vibes and the feeling that we have about this program heading into the 2024 season. Now let's dive into we're going to get into some conversation about the matchup between Notre Dame and Pitt. Obviously, Notre Dame takes on the Pitt Panthers this weekend. It is a rivalry game for Notre Dame this weekend, and Pitt is a team that doesn't necessarily get the amount of maybe some of the same hype that other Notre Dame rivals get. And obviously, when you hear Notre Dame fans talking about I want to get back to playing Michigan State again, and I want to get back to playing Michigan again, and I want to get back to, playing whatever other team again. And we kind of forget, like, Pitt's a team that Notre Dame has played a lot over the years. And I always hear about how, Notre Dame and Michigan are rivals. And I always say, like, they've played each other, what is it, like 40, is it 43 times in history? 43 times. Whereas you look at Pitt and Notre Dame, they've played each other over 70, 80 times actually. So no, over 70 times. They've played each other, 71 times in history. And going all the way back to 1909, they played each other in the from 1909, 1911, 1912. They played each other every year in the 30s up to 37. Then they played each other starting again in 43 up to 49. Played each other several times. Actually, that's the 50s is the first decade they played. Oh, no, they didn't play in 55, but all but 1 year in the 50s, played a bunch in the 60s, played a bunch in the 70s, played a bunch in the 80s, played a bunch in the 90s, played each other in the 2000s, and then since 2010, when Brian Kelly was hired, they played each other 7 times as well. So this is a team that Notre Dame has a much longer tradition with than they do Michigan, for example, or they do Stanford. Those are teams that certainly Notre Dame it has a rivalry with. I'm not saying that they're not a rival, but Notre Dame's played Stanford 35 times. That's it. 35 times. That's half, less than half, or not even half of the amount of times they've played Pitt. So this is a rivalry game. Geographically, it's a bit of a rival. If you have ever lived in Pittsburgh like I did, you realize there's 3 teams that have a big fan base in there, and I would argue Notre Dame is in the top 2 along with Pitt, and then Penn State would be third. I mean, there's Michigan fans and Ohio State fans, but as far as like the top 3 fan bases, Notre Dame and Pitt are 2. There's a ton of Notre Dame fans in Pittsburgh, and then obviously a lot of Pitt fans as well. But when you look at this game, obviously it's not about what they've done in the past, it's about who they are now. And who they are now are 2 teams that are sort of heading in a different direction. Notre Dame is an ascending program with Marcus Freeman. They've improved from last year. They went 9-4 last year. Both teams actually went 9-4 last season. Notre Dame and Pitt also both finished very strong last season. If you look at how they started and how they ended, Notre Dame, as we've talked about a bunch, was a 3-3 at one point in the time last season, and then won 6 of their last 7 games to finish 9-4. Pitt last season at one point in time was 4-4 and won their last 5 games to finish 9-4. Notre Dame has come out this year. They've climbed into the top 10 at different parts of the season. They fell out when they lost to Ohio State. And then they fell out of the top 20, or actually they dropped to the bottom, I think 21st in one of the polls. I think both of the polls, actually. They dropped into the 20s after the loss to Louisville. And of course, now you jump back up after this past week, or after the win over USC. They jumped back in, and then of course this past week, as more teams lose, Notre Dame was able to climb back up, and now they enter this game ranked 14th in both polls. So clearly, two programs that are sort of this season, anyways, trending in a different direction. Pitt's had a lot of injuries up front. Their quarterback transfer didn't pan out at Phil Dracovic. They're playing another quarterback transfer, and Christian Veillere, I think is how I saw them say it's Christian Veillere, which doesn't at all look like how it's spelled. He's a Penn State transfer. He's a redshirt freshman, I believe. But Pitt's a team that's really struggling to find its way this season. And then you look at Notre Dame; they're hoping to finish the season on a very strong note. The big matchup that I think means the most to this game is going to be the Notre Dame offense against the Pitt defense, and that's where we're going to start our conversation. So it was very fascinating diving into the numbers for this matchup, because when you look at Notre Dame's raw numbers, they're still really good. I'm just going to kind of quickly go through them here real quick, and then I'll get back up into the scoring offense or total offense versus total defense here. But if you look at Notre Dame, they rank 17th in points per game, 15th in yards per play. They rank 30th in yards per attempt rushing. They rank 17th in yards per pass attempt, 20th in yards per completion, 11th in pass efficiency. There's a lot of things to like about Notre Dame's offense from a pure statistical standpoint. But when you look at the overall and kind of say, where are they right now? They don't look like the team that was scoring 46 points a game the first 4 games. And so, and then you look at Pitt, and Pitt's kind of the polar opposite. Pitt ranks really high in certain yards per play and total yards numbers, but their scoring defense isn't great. And when you watch the Pitt defense on film, it's a very interesting team to watch, because in a lot of ways they're every bit as scrappy, they're every bit as well coached as they've always been under Pat Narduzzi, but you could tell they just don't have the players that they have. But if you don't bring your A game and you don't play focused football, they're good enough to beat you, and that's what they showed against Louisville. And this is a team, I wouldn't call them dangerous. It's just a team that if you just think you're just going to roll the ball out there and beat them, it's just not going to happen. But I do think it's an opportunity for this offense to kind of get itself on track to a degree. But when you look at the overall numbers, you see a lot of similarities in some of the statistics. Notre Dame overall 17th in scoring offense. Pitt is 64th in scoring defense. But the thing is, it's flipped when it comes to plays. Notre Dame is 52nd in yards per game and 15th in yards per play. You can kind of ask how that is. I think most of us understand why that is. It just means that Notre Dame doesn't run a lot of plays. And there's a much different conversation to be had about that. But the fact is that Notre Dame this season, when you look at them in total plays run, despite playing an extra game more than most people, they are 68th in yards in total plays on the season. They would rank even lower if you looked at just total plays per game. So that's why you see that disparity. Third down offense has been a struggle. Red zone offense has been pretty good. Ranked 33rd overall. They rank 19th in touchdown percentage on offense, which is a pretty good number, obviously, and something that you hope that you can build on. So when Notre Dame gets into the red zone, they score at a high rate, and they especially score score touchdowns at a higher rate. But the issue for Notre Dame, we talked about this again, is that they rank 59th in the country in total red zone trips. Now, part of that is early in the season, they were getting a lot of big plays. But in recent games, they just haven't moved the ball effectively or consistently enough to even get into the red zone. I think the Louisville game, I'm trying to remember, like Notre Dame they only got to the red zone twice, I believe, or twice when the game was in doubt. and just not getting those opportunities that they had early in the year to score. But they are scoring when they get there. Big plays, and their name ranks 24th nationally. They rank 24th when it comes to fewest turnovers. And then Pitt isn't good in the red zone, not good on they're not good when it comes to limiting big plays. They do give up big plays. They haven't forced a ton of turnovers, which normally they do. Their yards per play is down. Their third down defense is kind of above average, but that's about it. Looking at the rush numbers, Pitt ranks 48th in the country in rush defense. Notre Dame ranks 56th in rush defense. Both of them are better when it comes to yards per play. Pitt ranks 21st in the country, giving up only 3.2 yards per carry. Notre Dame ranks 30th in the country when it comes to yards per carry at 5.0. And again, this is a byproduct of the fact that Notre Dame hasn't run a lot of plays. Notre Dame ranks 9th in the country in fewest tackles for loss allowed, which is a positive. But they only rank 39th when it comes to carries of 20 yards or more. When you consider Notre Dame has still played one more game than most teams, that's a little bit of a disappointing number, especially when you consider that early in the season, Notre Dame was ripping off a lot of big runs. And that's been a big reason for the lack of success the last 4 games has been just very limited big plays. One here, a couple there. It just hasn't been the volume that we saw earlier in the year. Like Navy, Notre Dame didn't have any like 50-plus yard gains, but a lot of 20 pluses. And we just haven't seen as much of that. Pitt, on the other hand, is a team that's very good at tackles for loss. That's probably the battle here that's going to be interesting. They rank about the same where Notre Dame does when it comes to limiting big plays, as far as about the same from an opposite to who Notre Dame is, right? So Notre Dame doesn't make a lot of big plays in a run game or hasn't. Pitt gives up a decent amount, from a relatively about the same standpoint. When you look at Pitt's rush defense, it's been a weird. I mean, it just Ryan used the word weird yesterday, I think, and I concur. When you look at Pitt, like there's some games they look great. Their run defense looks great. They held Wofford to -1 yards. They held North Carolina to 77 yards rushing. They give up 80 yards rushing at Louisville. Now, Louisville ran the ball well on them early. Not big plays, but, 5, 6s and plays, things like that. And then really shut them down in the second half. But then they gave up 199 to Virginia Tech, 216 to Cincinnati, and then 172 last weekend to Wake Forest. So Pitt, they've been very inconsistent running the football or stopping the run, and Notre Dame's been very inconsistent running the football. So this matchup right here is about 2 very inconsistent groups, and it's going to play a role in the game. There's no doubt. Notre Dame's going to have to be able to find ways to run the football on Pitt. You can't just go out and say, hey, we're just going to throw it all day. You have to find ways to run. You also can't just methodically go, 3.2 yards per play, 4 yards per play like some other teams have. You've got to find some ways to generate some big plays in a run game. And I don't just mean like 40-yard runs. I mean 15s, 20s. Things like that, where you can get some chunk plays against this Pitt defense, because that's where you can have success against Pitt, is being able to generate the big plays. Because if you can do enough of them, get enough 15 pluses, enough in the run game, enough 20 pluses and 30 pluses in the pass game, that's when you can force Pitt to kind of get on their heels a little bit and get out a little bit of what they're trying to do defensively. So that's going to be a big part of what Notre Dame is going to have to try to do in this game offensively. And if they can't strike some level of balance, it's going to be hard for them to be as effective against Pitt as they need to be, to not only win, but to look good doing so. But here's the matchup for me that matters most in this game. It's the Notre Dame pass offense against the Pitt pass defense. And these are some of the more strange stats that you're going to see. Pitt this year ranks 27th in fewest yards in yards allowed per game. So they're 27th best when it comes to limiting passing yards. And they are 12th in the country in sacks. Very good numbers. Notre Dame only ranks 48th in the country in passing yards per game at 249.3. However, when you dive a little bit deeper into the numbers, you see that this is an area that on paper, Notre Dame has a big advantage. Notre Dame on paper, Notre Dame ranks 17th in yards per attempt, 20th in yards per completion, 8th in touchdowns, 8th in fewest interceptions, 11th in pass efficiency, 28th in fewest sacks allowed, and they're 38th, which is okay, in plays of over 30 yards. Now, that all sounds great. I mean, it sounds great. Like, oh, Notre Dame should dominate this matchup. Here's the problem. Those numbers are still dependent upon the first 4 games of the year. And I broke it down yesterday. The first 4 games of the year, and I'll say it again just to kind of, because when you hear it, it's just like, wow. Like I can't. It still seems kind of crazy to even hear when I look at it. And then I've done this research, but when you look at the pass game, for example, in the first 4 games of the year, Notre Dame averaged 304.3 yards per game and 11.3 yards per pass attempt. In the last 4 games, they've only averaged 194.3 yards per game and 6.8 yards per attempt. Notre Dame can beat Pitt if they only throw for 195 yards and 6.8 yards per catch. They can. It's just going to be ugly. And it's going to tell me that this team hasn't gotten any better. They haven't made – it's not that they won't have made changes. They just won't have made any changes that matter. They won't have made any changes that really have impacted the team positively, because like when a team continues to struggle, there's this misguided notion amongst us as fans that, well, they didn't make any changes. Well, yeah, they made changes. They made, and here's or they don't, this staff doesn't adjust. Well, maybe, but it doesn't mean that. Sometimes staffs do make changes and the changes just aren't any better than what they were originally doing. It's like, a coach can go out there and fire a coordinator and then go replace him with somebody else. And you're like, he made a change. Its problem still exists. If Lincoln Riley goes out and fires Alex Grinch and hires somebody new, guess what? That defense still isn't going to be good, because it's more of a Lincoln Riley problem than it is an Alex Grinch problem. So it's really not so much about, will they make changes or not? I fully expect them to make changes. The question is, will the changes work? Will they be effective? Will Notre Dame be able to get back to being that team again, right there, that does this? A team that ranks around 9 yards per attempt, a team that ranks around, 13 plus yards per completion, a team with a high passer rating, a team that can generate big plays in the pass game. Can they get back to being that team? That we don't know. Because right now, if Notre Dame plays the rest of the year and looks like that statistically, if they just play at their average when it comes to yards per attempt, yards per completion, touchdown interception ratio, efficiency ratio, and big play ratio, this team on offense will do very well. Very well. The problem is in the last 4 games, they haven't been anywhere close to that average. And so we're going to find out who this Notre Dame team is. Is it one that just was able to out-talent 4 not very good defenses early in the year, 3 not really good defenses early in the year, and when the competition got better, they kind of got back to who they really were? Or did they just go through a speed bump in the last 4 games? Well, really 3 of the last 4 games. USC game's a little bit of a different issue and different result, which we can get into at another time. But so that's the question, right? And the issues are all around. And here's where Notre Dame is at. It's easy. Like we as fans, we take way too many easy outs, right? And we throw out these just kind of easy to say things. Oh, offensive coordinator stinks. Okay, why? Why does he stink? What's the problem? And well, they don't have talent. Okay, yes, they do. These aren't easy answers, and they're not easy fixes. But that's what these guys get paid to do. It's not just the offensive coordinator stinks problem. Jared Parker's got to do a better job. He's got to do a better job in preparation. He's got to do a better job getting his coaching staff to get their guys prepared to execute at a high level, because execution at the end of the day is a result of what the players do, but what the players do is a result of how you're prepared throughout the course of the week and whether or not your play calls are putting them in a position to be successful. I've always believed that. As a former coach, I will always hold that point of view. If you're someone who views execution as a player thing, you're never going to get me to agree with that, because the players have to be the ones executing, but it's a byproduct of the job you do as a coach in preparation for that game. And so we're going to find out if the coaches can do that. Can they get these guys ready to execute a higher level? Can they put them in position to play to their strengths greater than we've seen them do in recent games? Those are all questions we're going to have to find out. And if Notre Dame's coaching staff is able to do that, then I have all the confidence in the world that they're going to be able to get to these numbers. All the confidence in the world. If they just kind of keep doing what they've been doing with just some little tweaks and adjustments, then they're going to look more like the team we saw the last 4 games. And that's what we're going to have to find out, because I'm going to say it right now. Notre Dame does not have to be a team that throws for 300 plus yards a game. They don't. They don't have to be that team to win, but they have to do more than 249 against the better teams on the schedule. But even more importantly, they have to be here. They have to be a pass game that's efficient and has some explosiveness to it. You can't run the ball and dink and dunk against the best teams on the schedule, because what happens is you get to an Ohio State game and you say, hey, our efficiency numbers were pretty decent. We did turn the ball over. Okay, great. All right, because what do you hear Jared Parker and Marcus Freeman talking about? You got to not turn the ball over and control the line of scrimmage. All right, you did both of those things against Ohio State. Notre Dame's offensive line controlled the Ohio State defense. I say control, but like they won the battle the line of scrimmage for the most part, in my opinion. I mean, go look at the numbers. Notre Dame rushed for 176 yards on Ohio State, averaged 4.5 yards a carry, and you take out sacks, as in some of the like downs and stuff like that, they were even higher than that. That's by far the best performance anyone has had against Ohio State this year. The next closest yards per game average was 3.5 that Purdue had, and a lot of that was late. The next closest yardage number was 123. They've only allowed two other teams to even be over 100 yards, period. Maryland went for 106. Purdue went for 123. Penn State, who everybody told us before the season, including me, I told you all this as well, had arguably the best backfield in college football in Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. They just went out against Pitt, against Ohio State, and Katron Allen had 9 carries for 26 yards, and Nicholas Singleton had 9 carries for 48 yards. And as a team, they only rushed for 49 yards when you count sacks into there as well. But their two stud backs combined for, what would that be, 74 yards on 18 carries. Notre Dame's running backs racked up 176 yards in that game against Ohio State. So they controlled action and they didn't turn the ball over. They still lost 17-14. Why? Because they couldn't make plays in the pass game. Not enough. And that's what it comes down to for me, is if this offense is going to get going, if this offense is going to play championship caliber football, then the pass game has to be a greater part of it. So what does that mean against the Pitt game? When you look at Pitt, yards per game are good. They rank well in yards per game. They're in a good place yards per game. But when you dive into the numbers that matter, this is why I always say just raw numbers doesn't really tell the story. And the pass game is a perfect example. So, yeah, Pitt ranks where they rank, but they held West Virginia to 60 yards in a loss. They held Wofford to 127 yards. They held Cincinnati to 155 yards, and they held Pitt's third-string quarterback to 151 yards. Okay. They gave up 296 to North Carolina, 228, and 12 yards per attempt against Virginia Tech. They gave up 350 yards to Louisville. So this team has been kind of hit or miss. And so Notre Dame is going to have to find ways to be able to beat them in the pass game. When you look at when Notre Dame has had success against Pitt in the past, it's been about big plays in the pass game. You look at Notre Dame in 2020 when they went on the road and beat a pretty good Pitt team on the road. Ian Book went 17 of 30. Actually, he was actually a little better than that because you had the backups came in at one point in time. But Ian Book against Pitt that year went 16 of 30 for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's what they did against Pitt in 2016. In 2018, Notre Dame didn't throw the ball well early, and Ian Book didn't have he did struggle early in that game, and Notre Dame struggled to run the football, struggled to get anything going. But after falling behind, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it was something like Ian Book went like 9 of his last 10, threw for most of his yards in the last quarter and a half. He ends the game going 26 of 32 for 264 yards. Pretty good. We had 2 bad picks early. But when the pass game got going, that's when Notre Dame made their comeback and won that football game. And then, of course, you go back to 2015 when they played Pitt in 2015. Pitt came out. They did what they do, lined up, played their tough defense. Notre Dame goes Deshaun Kaiser goes 19 of 26 in that game. And, I think Brandon Wimbush threw a pass in that game. No, this is Deshaun. Yeah, Deshaun went 19 of 26 in that game, 262 yards, 5 touchdowns. Like, that's the recipe for success for Notre Dame against Pitt. It always has been. When Notre Dame just tries to go play bully ball against Pitt, it doesn't work out as well, at least not since Pat Narduzzi's been there. And it was the same thing when they played Michigan State, when Pat Narduzzi at Michigan State. When Notre Dame's offense was rolling, it's because they were balanced. They could throw the football. They could have success throwing the football. And when they couldn't throw the football, That's when they had trouble against those teams and had trouble scoring against those teams. So Notre Dame is going to have to find ways to get the ball down the field. They're going to have to find ways to throw the football and be effective throwing the football. And that's going to be a big part of being able to be successful in this weekend. And they're going to have to find answers on the outside. Simple as that. Notre Dame is not going to be able to go into this game and say, "Hey, we're going to." Because here's why I say that. And I should have probably brought a screenshot of this. But when you look at Pitt, they are going to basically play inside the numbers with a lot of bodies. Pitt is an aggressive cover zero, cover four team, which can turn into cover zero. Their safeties play really close to the box. That's why their top two leading tacklers are both I believe their top two leading tacklers are both safeties. I just want to check on that real quick just to make sure that I'm accurate in my comment. Yes, their top two tacklers, Donovan McMillan is a safety with 57 tackles. Javon McIntyre is next in tackles with 45. The next closest is Solomon DeShields with 36 tackles. And so your safeties make a lot of plays on the ball. Now, why is that? Well, that's not because Pitt is giving up a lot of big running plays. As I showed in the previous statistic, only giving up 3.2 yards per carry. They rank 21st in college football in yards allowed per attempt running. So these guys aren't like making tackles 9-10 yards down the field. What they're doing is they are very active in the run game. They are very active playing the alleys. If Notre Dame is just going to come out and run their snags and their meshes and things like that, and that's it, and they don't find ways to stretch the field, then this offense is going to have some problems. When the way to beat this offense is to find, or this defense is to find ways to throw the ball down the field. And it can be inside. It can be with your slots. It can. And it can be with your slots attacking outside. It can be with your slots attacking over the top of the field. They're going to have to find ways to get the ball down the field. What Notre Dame was able to do back in 2015 is they were able to throw over the top of the Pitt offense. And Will Fuller had, I think, 2 post-route touchdowns in that game. You've got to be able to attack the seams effectively. You've got to be able to get behind the safeties, over top of the safeties. You've got to be able to find ways formationally with motions and shifts to get the safeties in coverage, because that's another area where you can generate some big plays. And so Notre Dame is going to have to schematically design several ways, not just once or twice, but several ways to get the ball down the field. And then also when those opportunities come, the line's got to protect. Sam Hartman's got to throw the ball accurately, and the receivers got to go make plays. That's the big thing. Because somebody in the chat said this, Pitt's not afraid of the Notre Dame passing game. Well, no kidding. No one is right now. And that's but that matters, right? It's not a disrespectful mark to the response person said that. It's like, yeah, it's obviously. And for good reason, they don't respect the Notre Dame pass game. Notre Dame needs to make them pay for that. That's the biggest part of this matchup. If Notre Dame cannot find ways to get the game rolling in the pass game, yes, efficiency matters. I'm okay running the snags and meshes and check downs and things like that, but you've got to find ways to get the ball down the field. Taking some one-on-one go shots was part of that, right? You've got to be able to make some plays. You got to be able to find ways to get your outside receivers inside of the corners, and the release moves are going to be important. If you can stem them out and get up inside of them, which allows you to run some of your in cuts, which allows you to run some of your post cuts, there's opportunities there for that. There's opportunities there for flood concepts where you run verticals outside and run out deep out cuts or corner routes. There's reverse of that, the opportunities can get some of those deep high lows going where you clear out the safeties with the number 2 and you bring the number 1 guy deep 15-20 yards. He runs in cuts and you run some mesh stuff to occupy the linebackers. And then there's some holes that you can find. Louisville was able to find that. That's where Ian Book went a couple times against Pitt in 2020. I believe he had 2 long touchdowns against Pitt in 2020. No, one of them was just a deep ball that he just kind of hurled up, and Ben Skoranek went out and made a play over the guy and hauled it in and kind of ran. It was a bit of a busted play, but the other one, if I remember correctly, I'm going to try to find the highlights of it. The other one, a ball over the middle to Ben Skoranek, where he made the catch and made a long run. I'm going to actually find it. Yes, the first touchdown. It was a deep end cut by Ben Skoranek out of trips. Ian Book stepped in, he made a play, and he went deep. And so, yeah, that was your first touchdown. It was like a 30-something yard touchdown against Pitt. Next time Look, it wasn't a play where you just say, hey, let's design this wonderful concept. Notre Dame just dropped back. Ian Book threw it deep on 3rd and 14. Ben Skoranek went out and made a play on their corner and went for a long touchdown. So those are things you have to be willing to do. Is some of it's going to be scheme it up to where you can go make some plays, but the other part of it has to be you've got to be willing to just take some of those shots down the field. And if you're willing to take some of those shots down the field, then your receivers got to step up. So there's a lot of different things Notre Dame can do from the slot, from the outside, with your backs. You've got to have a good blitz beater game plan built in. And if you can catch Pitt in a blitz and you've got a really good blitz beater called, you can go against them. So there's a lot of different opportunities for you to attack the ball down the field, not just goes, right? When I say down the field, I'm not talking about just dropping back throwing go routes. That is probably the lowest percentage throw in all of football. You've got to throw it. And there's times where it's a good call, but it can't just be that. It's got to be posts. It's got to be outs. It's got to be, or deep outs. It's got to be corners. It's got to be deep ends. It's got to be seam routes. It's got to be over routes. There's got to be things where you're working vertically, working out, working in, and working over to attack down the field, 15 plus yards down the field, 20 plus yards down the field. Notre Dame has got to have a great game plan for that. And now at the end of the day, we talked about the receivers and the quarterback and the game plan. The O-line has to protect. That's the big thing, because part of the reason that a lot of teams can't do those things on Pitt, even though, like, you can maybe break it down, you're like, dude, this is open, that's open, this is open. And I'm a coach and I'm sitting here, man, if I'm just focused on the back end and the coverage structure, and I'm like, dude, there's like 15, 20 plays I could come up with that would rip this Pitt defense apart. Why do they do this? Here's why. Because they're betting that you're not going to have enough time to get to those zones. And so they're willing to be more aggressive and say, we'll expose ourselves to potential big plays because we're going to pressure the quarterback and we don't think you're going to have enough time to get to those zones. And then when you are able to get in the 3rd and 9s and 3rd and 10s, and those zones are no longer open because now they're dropping 6 and 7 into coverage at times. So that's what the battle is. At the end of the day, if the Notre Dame offensive line can control action, give Sam Hartman time to throw like they did against USC, then you're going to have an opportunity to go out there this season or in this game and hit some big plays in the pass game. And if they can do that, that's how Notre Dame can roll. That's how Notre Dame can come out in this game and really build some much needed momentum, but more importantly, can really, really rip up the Pitt defense. And if they do that, then you can start feeling like maybe they are about to turn the corner offensively. We're going to finish this part of the conversation up, this matchup part, with a look at the Notre Dame defense against the Pitt offense. And this is a giant mismatch, because even in the areas where Pitt has some decent numbers, Notre Dame is even better. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit. First, looking at the scoring offense and the scoring defense. Notre Dame is 14th in the country at 16.4 points per game allowed, which is really good when you consider the fact that Notre Dame's opponents are combined 40 and 18 on the season. They've played USC, who still has a top 5 scoring offense. They've played Ohio State this season, and played NC State, who doesn't have a very good offense, but it's a Power 5 team. Played Duke and played Louisville, and you're only giving up 16.4 points per game. It's very impressive from Notre Dame, and I would argue that doesn't even do justice to how well the defense is played. That would be my debate, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Notre Dame is 14th in yards allowed in points per game. They're 12th in yards per game allowed, 11th in yards allowed per play. Red zone defense against the red zone offense. This is where Pitt's been good. Pitt ranks 14th nationally in red zone offense and 17th nationally in red zone touchdown offense, which means when Pitt gets into the red zone, which isn't often, they score. And when you look at the national numbers and you say, hey, that Pitt team, they rank 14th and 17th. The problem for Pitt, however, has been that they just don't get in there a lot. If you look at the red zone opportunities, Pitt ranks 128th in fewest red zone opportunities, and they're tied with 4 other teams. There's only 2 teams actually below them. So that's how you can be 28th out of 133 and still only have 2 teams below you, because they're tied with 3 other teams, excuse me. So even their strength is not as good as Notre Dame because Notre Dame ranks third in red zone defense and sixth in red zone touchdown defense. So Notre Dame, that's a big part of the reason why Notre Dame just has been so good this season when it comes to not letting teams score, is because even when teams get into the red zone, they have trouble scoring. And when you look at Notre Dame, this for Ohio State, for example, we saw that against Ohio State as well, where and Ohio State had that last touchdown drive, they got in. Notre Dame didn't have enough guys on the field, but the other part of it is, Notre Dame also stopped Ohio State at the goal line earlier in the season, and so Notre Dame's red zone defense has been really, really good. If you wanted to find a beef, you could say that Notre Dame is 58th in red zone trips allowed. The one caveat there is they are ninth in fewest red zone trips allowed of teams that have played 8 games. So there's still teams that have played fewer games than Notre Dame. They'd still not rank super high if everybody else played 8 games. But for example, if teams that are currently in the 24 tied for 24th, because there's like 12 teams or like 10 teams tied for 24th, they only have to let teams get in 5 red zone trips in the next game to tie Notre Dame. So that's a decent amount of red zone trips, but not an insurmountable amount. So Notre Dame's they've been good on third down. I mean, in the red zone, as far as limiting opportunities, they've been good, but they've been great at stopping teams from actually scoring when they get in the red zone. So even the one thing that Pitt has working for them, Notre Dame is even better. Pitt doesn't turn it over a bunch. They've turned it over 8 times. 6 of them came in 2 games. And so half their games this year, they have not turned a ball over. Notre Dame ranks 24th in turnovers forced. So again, Notre Dame is better there. Let's look at the pass game numbers. This has been a big struggle for Pitt. This is the biggest mismatch of the game. And when you look at it, Pitt ranks 92nd in passing yards per game, 83rd in passing yards per attempt. They rank 77th in touchdown passes, which is not good. They've played 7 games and they've only had 11 touchdown passes. And yes, they've only thrown 5 interceptions. All of them came in 2 games. But when you consider how little they throw, that's a problem. That's a problem because Pitt doesn't throw the ball a ton. They currently rank 83rd in attempts per game at 30. Notre Dame, by the way, ranks 100th in attempts per game, by the way. Some numbers that aren't on here. Pitt ranks 128th in lowest completion percentage, which also plays right into Notre Dame's hands. As I said, this statistic is not on there. But when you look at the Notre Dame pass defense, they rank 4th in lowest completion percentage allowed. Notre Dame is 4th best in fewest touchdown passes allowed. And I talked about this before. Even the areas where Pitt is strong, Notre Dame is better. Pitt ranks 29th in yards per completion at 13.4, but Notre Dame ranks 22nd in lowest yards allowed per completion. Notre Dame has the number 4 pass efficiency defense. Pitt has the 96th pass efficiency defense. Pitt is 42nd in big plays, 30 plus yards. Notre Dame is 5th. They've only allowed 5 receptions of 30 yards or more all season. The only issue for Notre Dame in the pass game is they don't get after the quarterback a ton on the season. They're 75th right now in sacks per game. They've got 17 sacks in the season. Pitt's been okay at protecting the quarterback. The last couple weeks they've been better. We'll see if that can continue against Notre Dame. So we're going, because Louisville doesn't they pressured against Notre Dame well, but they don't pressure well. So we'll see if Notre Dame's able to get after the quarterback a little bit this week, and that's going to be a key because they've got a redshirt freshman playing quarterback, and they're going to have to get after that kid, get him out of sync, get him out of rhythm, and try to have more success getting to the quarterback this game, or continue having success getting the quarterback in this game. Wake, by the way, did not have a sack against Pitt either. Wake only has 17 sacks on the season. 10 of them came in 1 game. Wake only has 1 sack in the last 4 games. So again, they haven't really played really great pass rushing teams. If the only time you saw Louisville play, for example, was against Notre Dame, you're going to think, wow, Louisville's really good at getting after the quarterback. They're really not that great at getting after the quarterback. They're okay at getting after the quarterback. This season, Pitt has Louisville only has 15 sacks. 5 of them came against Notre Dame. So they haven't played teams that are very good at getting after the quarterback in recent games, which is played in that numbers. Notre Dame has to be be able to find ways to get after the quarterback. But I mean, like, look, Notre Dame doesn't dominate this matchup if what happens if they're just not focused. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Pitt doesn't have receivers that can hurt Notre Dame with any type of consistency. They don't have a quarterback that can hurt Notre Dame with any type of consistency. Play here, play there. They don't have an offensive line that should be able to protect the quarterback. This comes down to, does the Notre Dame defense come out and are they focused? Are they playing hard? And are they locked into what they're supposed to do? And do they execute? If they do, they will absolutely shut down this part of the game. And then it comes down to this matchup. And this is the matchup that to me is going to be, it's not so much a matchup to me that is going to say, hey, Notre Dame has arrived as a defense. They're truly an elite defense. But to me, it is very important to not just this matchup, but also it's important to telling us, has Notre Dame made some of the improvements they need to make down the stretch? I do think it's going to show us that, because Pitt does not have a very good offense. Right now, they're only averaging 111 yards per game. It's even worse if you take out the Wofford game against who's a Power 5 team. And the 6 games against FBS teams, all Power 5 opponents, Pitt rushed for 83 yards in Cincinnati, 130 against West Virginia, 113 against North Carolina, 38 against Virginia Tech, 88 against Louisville, 112 against Wake. The best yards per carry average they've had all year is 4.04 against North Carolina. They've been held under 3 yards per carry 3 times in those games. So half their games against Power 5 teams. Simply put, Pitt should not be able to run the ball on Notre Dame. And not only that, Notre Dame needs to dominate this matchup. They need to dominate this matchup. And if they do, it's going to tell us a couple things. Number one, that Notre Dame's quote-unquote lack of size does not hurt them, because the one thing Pitt has is size. They are 330 across the board at guard and tackle. Their centers, their small guy at 305. So it'll tell us, like, yes, Notre Dame doesn't have a traditional big defensive line, but they're athletic and they attack and they're disruptive. And Al Golden needs to absolutely turn that group loose. He needs to turn Al Washington's guys loose in this game and let them attack those big pluggers up front. And if they can do that, then I think Notre Dame's going to have a lot of success shutting this down. And the reason it's also important, because if Notre Dame can shut down the run game and make Pitt a sort of one-dimensional team, this is how this game becomes a blowout. So yes, the Notre Dame offense needs to play well. But what I don't want to see in this game, and some of y'all may disagree, a win's a win, and I mean, to a degree it is, but to me it's really not, because I'm a process over results guy. I don't want to see some 17-6 win. I don't want to see some 24-3 win. I want to see Notre Dame come out and thump Pitt. Now, it's not going to be easy because their defense is pretty good, but I want to see them come out and thump Pitt and just dominate on both sides of the ball. There's no reason this game should be close. There really isn't. And this matchup right here is going to tell us a lot about where this Notre Dame defense is mentality-wise in this game. And when you look at this matchup, Notre Dame ranks 52nd in rush defense, 40th in yards allowed per attempt. They're only 53rd in touchdowns allowed. They rank 95th in tackles for loss per game, and they rank 63rd in plays of carries of 20 yards or more. They've allowed teams to rip off big runs in recent games. If you look back to the Ohio State game, that game got broken open with a 61-yard run from Travion Henderson. Louisville obviously had some good numbers against Notre Dame, but a lot of it came from it was that one big carry early that allowed Louisville to kind of break that game open and take a lead on Notre Dame, and it kind of snowballed a little bit from there. I'm obviously referring to the 45-yard touchdown run from Jawar Jordan, and then he had a 21-yard touchdown run to kind of really put that game away. It was those couple big carries. That's 68 yards on 2 carries right there. If you look at what he did the rest of the game, 45-yard touchdown. He had a 21-yard touchdown. That is 66 yards. If you look at the rest of the game and you take those 2 carries away, he had 17 yards on 19 carries. That's a decent day's work, but for that kid and the big play guy he is, that's 4.1 yards per carry. Their backup running back had 3.4 yards per carry. Their next running back had 4.0 yards per carry. It was those 2 big plays. That's what beat you. If you look at Notre Dame overall, they gave up 185 yards that game. And again, I'll say it again, a lot of it was off that big play. If you look at what Louisville did the rest of the game, they only had 121 yards on 36 carries. On all the other 36 carries, Louisville only averaged 3.4 yards per attempt. That's it. 3.4 yards per attempt against Louisville. That's it. That's pretty decent against a team like Louisville that runs the ball as well as they do. The problem is you did give up those two big plays, and that allowed that sparked the Louisville offense. What you can't do against Pitt is let them establish the run. You can't give up any big plays because you were in the wrong gap, because you had a bad fit, because you weren't locked in, because you weren't, doing what you needed to do. You can't let them get the 4s, the 5s, the 7s, and just allow them to move the chains, because Pitt wants to slow this game down. They want to make this a 5 possession per game or per team game, 6 possession per game team. They want to keep the ball away. They're going to use every second on the clock, and they're going to try to come out and run the football and just milk the clock and hope that Notre Dame's offense will make enough mistakes to allow them to go make plays. That's what they're going to try to do. There's no doubt that that's what they're going to try to be in this football game, and Notre Dame has to have answers for it. And if they can dominate the run game and dominate the point of attack, create negatives in the run game, get after the run game, get them in second and long, third long, make this a game that's about Christian Veilleur's ability to throw the football and the ability of that offensive line to protect, and those receivers to get open, Notre Dame will dominate. And that's how you get 3 and outs. That's how you get turnovers. That's how you get your offense the ball more and more and more, and that's how you can get your offense going. So, yes, the offense has to play better, but the defense needs to do what they need to do against this type of team. This is not a very good Pitt offense. I just showed you the numbers. Not a good Pitt offense. It's a Pitt offense that doesn't have the personnel to match up with Notre Dame. They don't have the scheme to match up to Notre Dame. They don't have the quarterback to match up with Notre Dame. And at no point in time in the season have they had that hey, they're about to break out moment. They haven't had that. The only way that happens in this game is if you don't come in and focused, if you don't come in and execute at a high level. And I don't think the defense is going to struggle with that. I do anticipate the defense to dominate, but you've got to do it early, because the more possessions you can give your own offense in this game, the better you're going to be, the greater the chance that you're going to have at winning this football game. That's the big key for me. So, yes, the Notre Dame defense should dominate this matchup, but I want, statistically holding Pitt to 100 yards and all that, but I want to see them really dominate. I want to see this team come out on defense and be hungry to say, hey, look, last week was not a fluke. Because what's wild is I don't think Notre Dame's getting the respect that they should be for how good they were on defense. I don't. I mean, I hear all these people talk about, oh, USC did this, and it was more about like what USC didn't do as opposed to what Notre Dame did do. And if I'm this unit, I'm a little pissed about that, to be honest with you. And I want to go show people that we are an elite defense and then go out there and play like one. Because in a top defense, a top 10 defense, which I believe Notre Dame is, dominates this part of the matchup. And if they dominate this part of the matchup, then I promise you they'll dominate that part of the matchup. And if they dominate those two parts of the matchup, then they'll dominate this part of the matchup, which then also gives their own offense some good field position, more possessions, and that could be the thing that maybe gets this offense truly sparked. Because maybe that Marcus Freeman will adopt the mentality that hopefully then Jared Parker adopts, which is, hey, we do have a great defense, which means we can maybe be more aggressive offensively. Because if we don't score, if we do turn it over, near midfield, we have a defense that can shut that team down. And so be aggressive, take your shots. If you throw a bomb and Pitt picks it off, so what? Do I need to remind you again that you're giving up 16 points a game? You rank 14th in the country in points per game. They rank 88th. You rank 12th in the country in yards per game allowed. They rank 115th in yards per game. You rank 11th in yards per play. They rank 100th. You have the third best pass defense in college football. They have the 92nd best rush or pass defense in college football. And yeah, your run game's not great, but their their run offense is even twice as bad. So it's one of those things where defense, come out, attack, be aggressive, get the offense the ball, and then offense, what are you going to do with it? Against USC, I liked what I saw from the offense, taking advantage of what the defense gave them. I want to see them do that again. And if they can do that again, I have a feeling that this is going to be a big, big win for Notre Dame. It's really going to start with the defense. I think the defense can spark the offense. I believe that's how good Notre Dame's defense is, but especially in this particular matchup, I believe because Pitt is so bad on offense that if the defense does what it's capable of, they could be the thing that provides their own offense with a catalyst. And if they can do that, then we're going to have a lot of fun watching Notre Dame play on Saturday when the Pitt Panthers come to town. All right, last part of this matchup that we're going to discuss today, and we'll just kind of go through quickly, is just some players and coaches that I really want to see step up this week, and who I think, when you look at this particular matchup between Notre Dame and Pitt, are going to be keys to success. Just a reminder before I dive into this, we will not have a mailbag today. If you did have a specific question you really wanted to get answered, you can go ahead and throw in a super chat. Otherwise, go and throw stuff on the board, and I'll answer any questions on the Notre Dame message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. But here's some people, and it's three groups more so than three specific players or coaches, because and you'll see why. But here's some aspects of this that people that need to step up for Notre Dame. Number one, we'll begin with the offense. It's Jared Parker, number one, and he's got a very big job in front of him that started last week after the USC game. It started with the 3 days of practice. It came out, next with the time off. What are you doing to kind of get your head in the right place and get your mind in the right place and your body and spirit in the right place to kind of come out and lead this group? Because at the end of the day, Sam Hartman's not the ultimate leader on offense. Jared Parker is. And if Jared Parker can kind of really get this thing going, then this Notre Dame football team is going to be very dangerous down the stretch, if especially with the way that the defense is playing right now. So he's got to step up. And if you can have success against this defense, because Pitt is good on defense, and we broke this down. Pitt has a good defensive football team. They have decent talent, great scheme, great coaching. You all know I'm not a huge fan of Pat Narduzzi as a person. Just some of the way he acts towards Notre Dame, but man, as a defensive coordinator, he's always been a great defensive mind. I mean, just go back to his time in Michigan State. You go back to, all the years he's been at Pitt, they've always been pretty good on defense. And more often than not, they give Notre Dame problems. Notre Dame's has been able to get some big plays in certain years, but man, they've given Notre Dame a lot of problems over the years with his defenses, whether it be at Michigan State or at Notre Dame. And so this is going to be a well-coached, well-schemed unit. So if Jared Parker comes out, and this is why this is important, if Notre Dame comes out and they're the more physical team, if they are schemed up well, if they're able to be efficient and be explosive, because I think this is the part that Coach Freeman's missing. He talks a lot about efficiency, and he doesn't necessarily use that word, but it's control the line of scrimmage and not turn the ball over. Those things are all about efficiency. But you can't be a great offense if you're not efficient and explosive. I talk about this all the time. You've got to be efficient and explosive. You've got to be able to rip off 20-yard runs. You've got to be able to rip off 20, 30-plus yard pass games. Or pass plays. You've got to be able to occasionally rip off the 40-plus. And the 40, 50-pluses are nice. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 20-plus stuff because those then lead to some of the bigger plays. You've got to be able to get chunk plays. That's what it comes down to. You can't just methodically go 8, 9, 10 plays every single time you get the ball. That's just not realistic. Teams don't do that. You've got to be able to generate big plays. And when this offense struggles, it's not getting big plays. It's really that simple. Big plays happen as a result of executing a good scheme. Right? That's the reality of it. You could say, oh, it's about execution. Yes, but you have to execute a good scheme. You have to execute well-designed and well-called plays. And if Jared Parker can come up with a game plan that allows for Notre Dame to protect Sam Hartman, but also allows him to aggressively attack the ball and get the ball down the field, then this offense is going to have a chance to put up some really impressive numbers against Pitt and get this offense going. It'll also tell us a lot about the buttons that Jared Parker's been able to make, because this is the second best defense that I think that Notre Dame is going to face this rest of the way. Wake's a little bit better statistically, but there's a lot of factors for that. I think this is a very good Pitt defense, a very solid Pitt defense. That's a very well-coached Pitt defense, and I think it's the best coached defense Notre Dame's going to play. Clemson has better players, way better players. Pitt has better scheme. Pitt has better coaching on defense. And so if you're able to go out and have a good scheme where you're ripping off plays and you're able to move the chains and get the big plays and get points against this Pitt defense, it's going to tell me that Jared Parker has maybe turned the corner and is taking a really positive step. So he's number one for me. Number two, Sam Hartman. Look, I get it. I get all the reasons why Sam Hartman hasn't played great the last month. O-line hasn't given him a ton of time. You've had some drops at receiver. Scheme hasn't always been great. There's all types of things you can justify it, and I get all of it, and they're all legitimate. But here's the deal. You're a sixth-year senior. You're a captain. You're a guy that's thrown for a ton of yards in your career. You've got an opportunity to finish your career off on a very strong note and to make your mark at Notre Dame. Because right now, in 3 to 4 years, we won't be talking much about Sam Hartman the way it's gone. Nobody cares what he did against Central Michigan or Navy or Tennessee State. It's going to be about what he does moving forward. This is where his Notre Dame legacy gets defined. And it's not just about playing well. He needs to play well. He needs to play better. If you go back in the last couple games, I'm just telling you, there's been some balls where it's like, man, I bet you could wish you could have that back. The throw to Chris Tyree. I heard a statement that Sam made about, Chris needed to catch that ball. And I'm like, yeah, he needs to catch that ball. There's no doubt. But you got to throw that ball better. You've got to give Tobias Merriweather a better chance to make a play on that post route against Duke. You've got to throw that ball better. There's been guys open in the last couple games where it's like, dude, you got to take that shot. Well, they haven't been catching the ball. You've got to take that shot. If they don't catch it, that's on them. You've got to throw that football. And then also I want to hear that he's doing what he needs to do with that young group, getting them, getting with them, getting in the film room with them, getting on the practice field with them, being a leader. Earn that C on your chest when it comes to how you build up those guys, because you're a 6-year senior. It's about you lifting up those around you. And he needs to do that. And this is a great game for that, because Pitt's going to harass him a little bit. They're going to get their hits on him. They're going to probably get a couple sacks. But as long as the all-line gives him relatively consistent time to throw, I think he should do well and be able to have some success in this football game. So he's got to play well. When the opportunities are there, he's got to be willing to make the throws, and he's got to be accurate making those throws. And if Sam can do that and make good decisions sometimes means getting the ball out quickly on short stuff. Good decisions sometimes means taking the check down at the right time. But good decisions also mean when the ball's down is needs to get downfield, throw it downfield. And if he's willing to do that, then I think this offense is going to take off. And so Sam Hartman's another person that I think needs to play well in this game. If Notre Dame's going to not only beat Pitt convincingly, but then have it be a springboard to finishing the season as a whole very strong. Third person, well, it's third group. The outside receivers have got to step up in this game. And I don't, at this point, it's all of them. It's Jaden Thomas, it's Rico Flores, it's Jaden Greathouse, and it's Tobias Merriweather. All of them have got to step up and make plays. They're all going to get different chances. Yes, Chancey Stuckey needs to do a better job of coaching these guys up and better release moves and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, these guys got to take a little bit more pride in their craft. They've got to get out there and compete, and they've just got to make plays. And yeah, Jared Parker can make the calls and Sam Hartman can get the ball out, but if they don't make the plays, none of those first two things matter. And I know that the slots have been playing better the last couple games. Chris Tyrese had some big plays. Jordan Faison has had some big plays. We've seen the slot position produce, but the outs and the tight ends have certainly produced in the last month of the season. But the outside receivers, to me, the offensive line playing well is the ultimate key to Notre Dame really being able to get the offense going. But the one thing that can be can negate the play of the outside receiver of the offensive line is if the outside receivers don't make plays. If the outside receivers start playing better and start making more plays, and they've got to be given opportunities to do so. That's on Jared Parker. That's on Sam Hartman. That's on Chancey Stuckey. But when those opportunities come, they've got to make plays. They've got to make plays. And if they can make those plays, then this offense is going to take off. If the outside receivers over the next 4 games play good football, I'm not talking great. They don't need to look like Will Fuller and Michael, just play good football. This offense won't be stopped by any of the next 4 teams they play. And this team could be super, super dangerous. So that's what we need to see is and making plays is getting open on quick game, making catches on quick game. It means blocking well. It means playing with urgency. It means being sharper on your top ends. So if you're working a deep in cut and you're chop in cut, Sam Hartman's getting hit by that point in time, or he's throwing the ball and you're not there and it's getting picked off. it's going to come down to, or he's going to hold it and go. I mean, you've got to play with urgency. You got to be sharper, and you've got to go make those kind of plays. And so if he's able to do that, if they are able to do that, then this offense takes off, because there's a chance for them to be that group. I still believe this. I've not lost faith in those guys. I've not lost hope in those guys. I hope the coaches haven't either, and coach those kids up, get them sent, and I think they'll be good to go. But when you look at the offense, that's the next group that needs to play well. Transitioning over the defense, I'm going to be very brief with this one, folks, and then we'll answer we have a couple super chats. I'll get to those, but this is going to be very, very brief. When you look at this defense in this particular game, and I'm going to keep it more about this game on the first point and the second point, and then the third point will be more of this game's important, but it's also for bigger picture. The first two for this game, it's right up the middle. Number one is J.D. Bertrand. What I talked about is this is JD's got to step up in this game. This is not, as I've said before, step up is not always you're not playing well and you need to step up. Like it can be that, but sometimes it's just in this game, you've got to be a guy that steps up and really plays at a high level. Doesn't mean you haven't been. It just means, okay, that's fine what you did, but it's what you do now. And when you play a Pitt team, they're going to motion and shift and do a lot of different things. And I talked about it's about not making mistakes. It's about being locked in. Well, J.D. Bertrand's the leader of this defense. He's the middle linebacker. He's a captain. He's a guy that's going to play a big role in making sure that this group throughout the week of practice is locked in, focused, playing at a high level, giving great effort. If guys aren't, he's got to be in their face. He's got to be demanding that they do play with great effort. If they're not executing in practice, he's got to be on them. Can't just be Al Golden. It's got to be JD. And then, of course, when you get to the game, he's got to tackle well and make plays and all that. But also, he's the guy that gets everybody set. He's the guy that gets everybody locked in. He's the guy that gets everybody lined up. So if JD plays at a high level, then it's going to really affect those around him, because JD performing at a high level, because part of the performance of a middle linebacker is getting the calls and getting the checks made, make sure everybody's lined up. So he's going to have an important role. And if JD does that well, then I think that impacts the entire defense and gives Notre Dame a chance to play very well in this football game. We've seen in the past, what was the most sloppy game the defense had all year? Central Michigan. Who was missing that game? J.D. Bertrand. So it's not a coincidence. When J.D. is locked in and playing at a high level, this defense is incredibly good. But even when he's not playing at a high level, he still has a very important role when it comes to getting everybody lined up. If he can do both, Notre Dame will shut Pitt down. And then that plays into the guys in front of him. I mean, it's right up the middle. If Notre Dame's D tackles dominate like they have against Duke and against USC and some of the other games we've seen this year, if they play at that level, Pitt has no chance. No chance to move the football on the ground, and probably won't have a lot of time to throw the football. Their guards are just okay. That's it. They're just kind of okay. This is a game they need to dominate. Howard Cross is a very disadvantage from a size standpoint in this matchup against the guards, but huge advantage from an athleticism and leverage standpoint. Same with Riley Mills. He's going to give 30 pounds up in these matchups against the guards at Pitt, but he's much quicker, much more athletic, and if he plays like he did against USC, Pitt's going to have no chance. And then the last one's Jordan Botelho. He's got to step up at some point in time if this defense is going to truly get to its full potential. Josh Burnham's battling a hamstring. You've got Junior Chilamaka's a solid player right now. He's still young, still learning that position. You can't expect Boubacar to go from like 2 snaps to 40 snaps, right? I mean, they need Jordan Botelho to play well. And so that's not just true this game. He's got to be good setting the edge, and he's got to get after the quarterback. You cannot let this kid have a bunch of time to throw. I don't care how bad a pass offense is. If you allow a quarterback in any offense to have time to throw and be comfortable in the pocket, he's going to hurt you. And so the defensive line is going to have to apply that pressure. And Jordan Botelho especially has got to step up and play better football in the pass game. And if he does, and then that can kind of build in these last 4 games, that's going to play a big role in this Notre Dame defense finishing on a very, very high note. So those are sort of the step-up players for this game. Most of those are dictated towards this game specifically, but some of them, when you look at Sam Hartman, when you look at Jordan Botelho and Jared Parker, outside receivers, it's not just this game. It's also hopefully this game can then be a springboard. For J.D. Bertrand and the D tackles, it's keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you did last week. Keep doing what you did against Duke. And if they can do that, then this defense is going to continue to dominate. So that's going to do it for the Notre Dame versus Pitt matchup. I do have a couple quick super chats I want to quickly address. Well, I appreciate you guys sending those. P. Irish Guy, is there anything I can do to help with the tailgate? I'd love to give back to the community I've grown so fond of. Please let me know. Go Irish. just be there. I mean, that's the thing is, the only thing I always tell people is if you come and eat, be ready to eat. You know, my mom's gonna make some food. I forget. She told me the other day what she's making, but she's making something a little different this time. She's gonna have some stuff. You know, she still has stuff in our fridge, so she'll still make the meatballs and all that stuff that she did last time, which she left here last time, so it's in our freezer. She'll get that rocking and rolling. But also, she's got a couple other new things she's gonna try out, and so just eat. She loves it, man. When my mom loves catering, I've joked before, like I think sometimes the only reason most of my family members invite my mom to weddings is because they want her to cater it. And so she's catered a lot of weddings. Her and my grandma made a lot of the food that Angela and I had at our wedding as well. And so she loves doing it. But I mean, she just, when you do that like that, you want to see people eat it. That's just the thing. So just come, bring your appetite. That's it. And just hang out. This is what this is about. This is about a chance for us, for all of us to that know each other kind of in an online way, to get to know each other a little bit more personally. And so it was great meeting different people at these games. And that's really it for me, to be honest with you. Is just just be there and spend as much time as you can and bring your appetite. That's the big thing. And then T Smith 0323, can't wait to be at the game this weekend. My grandmother's working department at Notre Dame will be getting recognized this weekend. Can't wait. Go Irish. Well, that's really cool, man. Very glad to hear that. And if you're going to be at the game this weekend, that means you need to swing by the tailgate. So definitely do that. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I appreciate all of you being with us, being with me today. Ryan and I, we will have IB Nation Sports Talk tonight at 6 o'clock. Ryan and I will be back tomorrow to do our keys to victory for Notre Dame. And we will also do our predictions Friday. Ryan will have a recruiting show on Friday, and then post-game show on Saturday by me and Vince. Vince and I will be doing the post-game show on Saturday. So hopefully we'll be celebrating a victory. Going to be a lot of fun for that. But if you haven't done so already, do us a favor, folks. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you haven't, guys, I'm telling you, you will love the message board if you sign up. Right now, we're having a little bit of issue with the speed. We're working on that. We're going to get that addressed here in the next day or two. A couple things that we're checking, but we'll get that rocking and rolling, get the speed up to date and up to par. But you guys will really love the content we got going on. And like I said, yesterday, I said either today or tomorrow. That's today. We'll get a recruiting / team update. And so I will get that up this evening. So just waiting on a little bit more information that we're trying to gather. So we'll get that up as soon as possible. But that's only going to be for premium board members only. So definitely want to check that out. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.